Combining reading and listening creates a powerful learning experience, especially for building vocabulary, because it engages multiple senses at the same time. When learners only read, they may understand a word visually, but struggle to remember how it sounds or how it is used in natural speech. When they only listen, they may hear the word but fail to recognize it later in written form, leaving gaps in comprehension. By doing both together, the brain receives a stronger and more complete signal. Seeing the word and hearing it at the same moment forms a clear connection between its spelling, meaning, and pronunciation, making it easier to store in long-term memory. Another reason this method strengthens vocabulary learning is that it reduces confusion. English has many words that look nothing like they sound, and many that sound very similar to each other. A learner might mispronounce a word like though, through, or thought if they only read it. But listening while reading immediately reveals the correct sound connected to the correct spelling. This prevents the formation of wrong habits and helps learners avoid misunderstandings later. The combination also provides context clues. Hearing the tone, rhythm, and emotion in a sentence gives meaning to the words on the page, while reading shows how those words fit in a grammar structure. Together, they create a richer understanding of new vocabulary. Memory works better when information is repeated in different forms, and reading plus listening naturally creates this repetition. The learner first sees the word, then hears it, then often hears it again when reading the sentence more closely. This repetition strengthens memory without the learner having to force themselves to memorize, instead of struggling with long vocabulary lists. They absorb words naturally through exposure. Over time, words that once seemed difficult begin to appear familiar, and the learner can recall them more quickly. This method also increases engagement. Many learners find reading alone too quiet or slow, and listening alone too fast or unclear. But when they combine both, the experience becomes more dynamic and easier to follow. The audio keeps them moving forward, while the text helps them catch details they would otherwise miss. Because the activity feels easier and more enjoyable, learners are more likely to practice regularly, which leads to even stronger vocabulary growth. Listening to native pronunciation while reading helps learners improve their speaking and accent, because it provides a model of natural, authentic language that the learner can imitate and internalize. When someone only reads a word, they may guess the pronunciation based on spelling, which often leads to mistakes. English has many irregular patterns, silent letters, and exceptions that make pronunciation difficult to predict. But when a learner hears the correct version while seeing the written word, they immediately connect sound with spelling in a way that feels intuitive. This creates a strong mental picture of how the word should be spoken, reducing confusion and preventing bad habits from forming. This combination also exposes learners to the rhythm and music of English, something that reading alone cannot provide. English has stress patterns, intonation, and emphasis that give it its natural flow. Words are not pronounced in isolation. They blend together in sentences. When learners listen while reading, they notice how words change when spoken quickly, how certain syllables are stressed, and how native speakers naturally pause or speed up. These subtle details are essential for sounding fluent, but they are almost impossible to learn from text alone. Hearing them repeatedly helps learners absorb these patterns unconsciously, making their speech smoother and more natural. Another important benefit is that this method trains the ear and the mouth at the same time. As learners become familiar with how words and sentences sound, they begin to reproduce them more accurately when speaking. The process is similar to learning music. Listening creates internal familiarity, and reading shows structure. When both inputs are combined, learners gain confidence in repeating what they hear. Over time, their pronunciation becomes clearer, their accent softer, and their speech more consistent with native patterns. This happens not because they are memorizing rules, but because they are constantly exposed to real examples. Listening while reading also builds speaking confidence. Many learners hesitate to speak because they are unsure whether their pronunciation is correct. But when they regularly hear native audio while reading, they become more certain about how words should sound. This certainty reduces fear and encourages more speaking practice. As they continue using both methods together, learners find that they can articulate new vocabulary more easily and participate in conversations with greater comfort. Seeing the text while hearing it spoken helps learners understand sentence structure and grammar more clearly because it allows them to observe how written rules come alive in real communication. When reading alone, learners may notice grammar patterns, but they might not fully grasp how these patterns sound or how they function in natural speech. Listening alone, on the other hand, exposes learners to fluent language, but without the written text, they may not recognize specific structures or understand why certain words appear in a particular order. By combining both, learners connect the visual representation of grammar with the auditory experience of how it works in context, which leads to deeper comprehension. This method also helps learners understand how English sentences flow, especially in terms of linking words, reduced forms, and natural phrasing. Spoken English often includes contractions, reductions, and connected speech that can make sentences sound very different from the way they look on the page. Phrases like going to becoming gonna or want to sounding like wanna can confuse learners who only study grammar in textbooks. But when they read the correct written form while listening to how it sounds naturally, they begin to understand both the formal structure and the daily spoken version. This dual understanding makes grammar more meaningful and practical rather than just a set of rules to memorize. Another advantage is that learners can see the precise placement of words while hearing how they interact in real time. This is especially helpful for understanding articles, prepositions, verb tenses, and complex sentence patterns. For example, a learner might know the past tense in theory, but only through hearing it used while reading will they fully understand how the rhythm changes in a sentence like I was walking when it started to rain. The combined input strengthens the learner's awareness of how grammar supports meaning, making it easier to apply these patterns when speaking or writing. Combining reading and listening also reduces the cognitive load of processing grammar. Instead of trying to decode every structure alone, the learner receives audio cues such as intonation, pauses, and emphasis that guide their understanding. Hearing where a speaker pauses can help the learner recognize clause boundaries. Hearing stress can highlight important words or show which parts of a sentence carry meaning. Gradually, the learner begins to internalize grammar not as isolated rules but as natural patterns that form the foundation of fluent communication. Combining reading and listening increases focus and reduces frustration because it creates a balanced learning environment where the brain receives support from two sources instead of struggling with only one. When learners read alone, they may lose concentration because they cannot hear the natural flow or emotion behind the words, making the activity feel slow or tiring. When listening alone, they may feel overwhelmed, especially if the speaker talks quickly or uses unfamiliar vocabulary. By using both skills at the same time, the learner stays engaged, understands more, and avoids the feeling of being lost, which naturally boosts their motivation. This approach also eases the pressure that many beginners experience. Trying to catch every word by listening alone can be stressful, and missing part of the audio often leads to frustration. Similarly, reading without audio support requires constant effort to decode meaning, especially when sentences are long or complex. But when the text is visible while the audio plays, the learner has a safety net. If they miss a word by ear, they can see it on the page. If they don't recognize a sentence in the text, the audio helps clarify its meaning. This cooperation between the eyes and ears reduces confusion and creates a smoother learning experience. Another reason this method reduces frustration is that it prevents the feeling of I don't understand anything, which is common at the early stages of language learning. The audio keeps the learner moving forward, preventing them from getting stuck on difficult parts. While the text provides clarity when the audio seems too fast, this balance encourages learners to continue, even when the material becomes challenging. Instead of giving up, they stay in the flow of the story or lesson, gaining confidence with every minute of practice. The combination of reading and listening also keeps the learner's mind active and prevents boredom, which is one of the biggest barriers to consistent learning. The audio adds energy, tone, and emotion, while the text adds structure and detail. This blend makes the activity more dynamic and enjoyable, helping the learner maintain attention for longer periods. As a result, they become more consistent in their study habits, and consistency leads to real progress. Over time, learners realize that they can understand more than they expected, which builds motivation and reduces the frustration that often comes with traditional learning methods * consistent daily practice, even in small amounts, leads to fast progress because language learning relies on steady exposure rather than long, irregular study sessions. When learners practice reading and listening together every day, their brain becomes accustomed to processing the language regularly, which strengthens memory and increases familiarity with common words and structures. Even 10 minutes a day can be more effective than studying for an hour once a week, because the frequent repetition helps the brain build stronger connections. These small but continuous steps accumulate over time, allowing learners to improve naturally without feeling overwhelmed. Daily practice also reduces the time needed to warm up during each study session. When learners take long breaks, they often forget vocabulary, lose confidence, and need extra time to review old material before learning something new. But when learning becomes a daily habit, the language stays fresh in their mind. They remember more, understand faster, and feel more prepared each time they start studying. This creates a positive cycle where learning becomes easier, faster, and more enjoyable. Regular exposure helps learners recognize patterns and understand grammar effortlessly, because their brain absorbs the language little by little every day. Another advantage of consistent daily practice is that it builds discipline and momentum. Short sessions are less intimidating, so learners are more likely to stick with them. Instead of waiting for the perfect time to sit and study, they can practice anytime by reading a short article, with audio, or listening to a story while following the text. This flexibility makes it easier to keep going, and once the habit is formed, skipping a day feels more unusual than completing a short session. As the routine strengthens, learners begin to notice small improvements, such as understanding a sentence more quickly or recognizing a new word without effort. These tiny achievements motivate them to continue. Daily practice also supports gradual vocabulary growth. Words that were once difficult start appearing more frequently, and repeated exposure helps them become familiar, because learners encounter these words in different contexts each day. They learn how to use them naturally in sentences rather than memorizing them from a list. Over time, this leads to faster reading, better listening skills, and greater confidence when speaking or writing. The steady rhythm of daily practice ensures that progress is constant, even if it feels slow at times. And the combined effect becomes noticeable and rewarding as learners move closer to fluency *. Using audio with text makes learning more enjoyable and helps learners stay motivated for the long term, because it transforms the study process into an engaging and interactive experience. When learners listen and read at the same time, the content becomes livelier and easier to connect with. The audio adds emotion, tone, and energy to the words, while the text provides visual clarity and structure. This combination prevents the boredom that often comes from reading alone and reduces the stress that can appear when listening without support. As a result, learners feel more involved in the material, which keeps their interest strong and encourages them to continue. This approach also taps into different learning preferences. Some learners are visual, while others are auditory, and using both methods together ensures that everyone benefits. Visual learners appreciate seeing how words are spelled and how sentences are built, while auditory learners gain confidence from hearing fluent pronunciation and natural rhythm. When both styles are combined, learners absorb information more comfortably and effectively. They feel less pressure because the two modes support each other, making the experience smoother and more balanced. This supportive environment helps learners stay consistent, even when the content becomes more challenging. Another important reason this method boosts motivation is that it provides constant feedback. When learners follow the text as they listen, they immediately notice words they recognize and structures they understand, giving them a sense of progress. They can also identify areas where they struggle, but the audio helps them overcome those difficulties without feeling discouraged. This instant reinforcement builds confidence, which is one of the strongest motivators in language learning. The more confident learners become, the more likely they are to continue practicing and exploring new content. Using audio with text also brings variety to the study routine, preventing monotony. Learners can enjoy stories, news articles, podcasts, dialogues, and even songs while reading along. This variety keeps the experience exciting and fresh, making it easier to turn learning into a habit rather than a chore. With every session, learners build not only skills, but also enjoyment. And enjoyment is what makes progress last. In the end, combining audio and text turns language learning into a vibrant journey, one that inspires curiosity, strengthens motivation, and keeps learners moving forward with confidence and joy.